Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Batra, page 171b, top of the page with the words Lo, Nechleku El Bishtar Meuchar Be'alma. The two sages disagree only with regard to a case of a post-dated promissory note in general, meaning in one in which the fact that it is post-dated is not readily discernible from the dating of the document, as opposed to one dated on Shabbat or Yom Kippur. Rav Yehuda letamei de Amar ein kosvin shovar v'lo nafik minei churba. As Rabbi Yehuda conforms to his line of reasoning, as he says, one does not write a receipt for a debtor when he pays his debt. Rather, the original document is torn, and in the case of partial repayment, a new document is written, attesting to the balance due. And consequently, no harm can emerge from a post-dated document. There is no concern that the date on the post-dated document may have been recorded after the writing of a receipt. Rav Yehuda letamei, Rav Yossi letamei de Amar, kosvin shovar v'nachaf minei churba. And Rav Yossi conforms to his line of reasoning, as he says, one writes a receipt from a debtor when he pays his debt in lieu of tearing the promissory note, and consequently harm can emerge from a post-dated promissory note. Harm can occur in such a case as the following. In a case such as the following. The loan in a case such as the following. The loan was given on the 1st of Nisan. The debt was paid on the following day, and rather than tearing the promissory note, a receipt was written and dated on the 2nd of Nisan. If the original note had been post-dated to the 3rd of Nisan or hereafter, the creditor could use it to collect his debt a second time, arguing that the debtor's receipt is irrelevant as its date is prior to the date in the promissory note. Amar Yehoshua Afilo Laman de Amar Kosvin Shovar Hani Mili Apalga Aval Akuli Lo. Rav Huna, son of Yehoshua, says, even according to the one who says that one writes a receipt from the debtor when he pays in lieu of tearing the promissory note, this statement applies only with regard to a case where the debtor pays half. In other words, a portion of the debt, but with regard to a case where the debtor comes to repay all of the debt, and the creditor has lost the promissory note and cannot tear it, all agree that one does not write a receipt. Rather, the debtor will not be required to repay the loan unless the creditor can produce the promissory note. The Gemara rejects this opinion, but it is not so. We write a receipt even in a case where the debtor pays all of the debt. Ki had Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef Havi Masik Bezuzi Rabbi Abba Az Kamadem Chanina bar Papi Amale Havli Zuzi Amale Havli Shtarai Ushkol Zuzach Amale Shtarach Ir Gasli Echtov La Tavara Amale Harav Ushmuel Daretavayu in Koisvin Shova. The Gemara proves its assertion. It is like that case where Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef was owed money by Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef came before Rabbi Chanina bar Papi and said to Rabbi Abba, "Give me my money." Rabbi Abba said to him, "First give me my promissory note, and then take your money." Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef said to him, "I lost your promissory note. Instead, I will write a receipt for you." Rabbi Abba said to him, "Isn't there an opinion of Rav and Shmuel, who both say that the halacha is that one does not write a receipt?" Amar, Man Yahivlan mi'afrei Rabbi Shmuel Raminan ba'einan. Had Rabbi Yochanan had Reish Lakish t'matavayu kosvin shoyim. Rabbi Chanina bar Papi, the judge, thereupon said, "Who will give us some of the dust of Rav and Shmuel, and I will place it on my eyes? So highly do I regard them, nevertheless." Isn't there an opinion that Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, who both say that one does write a receipt. And similarly, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said that Rabbi Eli says the halacha is that one does write a receipt. One writes a receipt. Umistava the kohes bin shoval. Di sol kedaita in kohes bin shoval ad shtorish lezeh yochal hala vechadi. The Gemara concludes that it stands to reason that one does write a receipt, and as if it would enter your mind that one does not write a receipt, then if the promissory note of this creditor is lost, should this debtor eat and rejoice? Is it fair that he should keep money that he knows he owes the creditor? Maskif le'abaye ve'alamai koisin shoval avad shoval shel ze yochal hala v'chadi amar le'rava in avad love le'ish malve eved love le'ish malve. Abai objects to this line of reasoning. Rather, what should the halacha be? That one writes a receipt when the creditor cannot find the promissory note. If the receipt of the debtor is lost, should this creditor eat and rejoice? Once the debtor has lost his receipt, there is nothing to prevent the creditor from collecting a debt a second time. This too is unfair. In either case, whether a receipt is written or not, an injustice could result. Why should it be preferred that the potential of suffering and injustice should be borne by the debtor rather than by the creditor? Rava said to Abaye, yes. It is preferable because, as it is written, the borrower is a servant to the lender. Proverbs 22, verse 7. The debtor's interests are subordinated to those of the creditor. We learned in the Mishnah elsewhere in Shvi'i 10.5, promissory notes that are antedated are not valid, but those that are postdated are valid. My time, Zimnin Bizavin Le Ara Benisan, because of Le Tishrei, Umisrami Le Zuze Bene Bizavin Le Mine. Vichi Mati Tishrei, Mapik Le Amar Le, Hadar Zavanta Mina. Rav Hamnuna says they taught this halacha only with regard to promissory notes. With regard to deeds of buying and selling property, even postdated documents are not valid. What is the reason? What is the reason for the season? For this stringency? What is the reason for the stringency in the case of bills of sale? If postdated documents were allowed, there could be times that the seller sells land to the purchaser in the month of Nisan of a particular year and writes a postdated deed from stating that the sale took place in the following Tishrei, and some money happens to reach the seller between Nisan and Tishrei, and he purchases the land back from the purchaser, and then, when Tishrei arrives, the purchaser takes out the original bill of sale and says to the seller, "It is true that you purchased the field from me, but then I purchased it from you again now in Tishrei, as stated in this document." Ihachi shitrei alvanami zimnin diazif benisan uchasiv le shtara betishrei misrami le zuzi beni ubeni uparale ve'amar le havli shitarai ve'amar le irkas li v'chasiv le tavara v'chimati zimna mapik le ve'amar le hani hashta ha dizyafta minai. The Gemara asks, if so, a similar scenario could occur with the promissory notes as well. There could be times that one borrows money in Nisan and writes a promissory note for the creditor stating that the loan took place in the following Tishrei, and some money happens to reach the debtor between Nisan and Tishrei, and he repays his debt to the creditor early and says to him, "Give me my promissory note." And the creditor says to him, "I lost it," and he writes him a receipt instead. And then, when the time written in the note arrives, the creditor takes out the supposedly lost promissory note and says to the debtor, "It is true that you repaid me previously, but it is now, after you repaid that loan, that you borrowed from me these dinars, recorded in this document, which is dated in Tishrei." Kasavar and Kosvin Shovar, the Gemara answers, Rav Hamnuna holds that one does not write a receipt, so that scenario cannot occur. Like Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Hamnuna maintains that if a creditor loses his promissory note, the debtor does not have to repay the loan. Rav Yossi, who does not allow the creditor to collect his debt in such a case and write a receipt for the debtor, is concerned about that scenario, and consequently he holds that post-dated promissory notes are not valid. Amar le Rav Yemar le Rav Kahana, Amar le Rav Yirmiyah midifti le Rav Kahana v'ha'idina de kazvinan shtare me'uchore v'kazvinan tavra amai ka'avdinan hachi. Amar le basar de amri lehu Rabbi Abba lisafre ki kosvitu shtare me'ucharai kosvu hachi shtara dinan lo bezimne kazvinan ela achranoi u ketavnoi. Rav Yemar said to Rav Kahana, and some say it was Rav Yirmiyah of Difti who said this to Rav Kahana, and today, when we write post-dated promissory notes, and we also write a receipt in cases where the creditor loses his promissory note, why do we do this? The combination of allowing post-dated promissory notes and allowing the writing of a receipt instead of producing the promissory note would enable double collection of a loan to take place. Rav Kahana said to him, the problem was rectified after Rabbi Abba told his court scribe, when you write post-dated promissory notes, write as follows. We did not write this document on this date, meaning on the date written within the document. Rather, we post-dated it and wrote it. Since it is clear from the text of the document that it was post-dated, double collection of the loan is avoided. Amar le Rav Ashi Rav Kahana v'ayina de loka avdinan hachi batar de amar le Rav Safra le Safrai ki katvitu hanitavari iyaditu zimna dishtara katuvu ilo katuvu sitam dechol emadena v'glerai. Rav Ashi said to Rav Kahana, but what about today, when we do not do this? In other words, we do not follow Rav Abba's instructions. How do we avoid double collection of a loan? Rav Kahana replied, the problem was rectified under Rav Safra. After Rav Safra said to his court scribe, when you write these receipts for debtors who paid debts without the original promissory note being torn, if you know the date written in the missing promissory note, write it into the receipt. But if you do not know the date written in the promissory note, write the receipt without specification, meaning do not write any date at all in the receipt, so that whenever the creditor produces a promissory note, the undated receipt can weaken it, meaning exempt the debtor from payment. Amar le Ravina le Rav Ashi, Amar le Rav Ashi le Rav Kahana. Ravina said to Rav Ashi, and some say it was Rav Ashi who said to Rav Kahana,